The Atlanta Falcons lost on Thursday night in Week 10 to the Carolina Panthers for a lot of reasons beyond the quarterback, but we're going to talk a lot about how this loss should be Marcus Mariota's final start and why the Desmond Ridder era needs to begin.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, guys, you know me. I'm Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Sirius Black, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. your very humble host here of this illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast family. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. They are helping you find the right candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedon NFL. And so, guys, we thank you for staying up late on this Friday morning here on the East Coast. If you're watching on YouTube or, waking up, going to commute early in the morning on Friday, trying to get your Falcon fix here on Locked On Falcons. So we thank you for making Locked On Falcons your first listen each and every day. Of course, it's free and available on a variety of podcast platforms, including on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Falcons on YouTube, and you'll get the video version of the podcast the night before the audio drops. In these postcasts, rapid reactions around the same time that the audio drops. But let's talk about why the Falcons lost. We're going to get to Marcus Mariota on today's episode, but let's talk about the reasons why the Falcons lost without sort of pointing the blame at one person, Mariota, Arthur Smith, Colby Gossett, Dean Pease, whoever is the guy that, is causing your current anger, right? The main reason why the Falcons lost is they couldn't run the ball, right? Panthers were able to shut that down. They only gave up 33 rushing yards. The Falcons only gained 33 rushing yards in the first half. They did finish with a much more respectable 138 by the game's in. But they fell into a deficit, 10-point deficit, 13-3 at halftime, and they couldn't climb out of it. And the main reason is because they couldn't throw the football, right? They did get a couple of explosive plays in the second half, but they weren't able to get those points, especially in the third quarter, on a couple of those explosive plays. The reason why the passing game was so ineffective was you had a lot of poor decision-making from the quarterback. You had a lot of poor blocking up front. Carolina finished this game with 5 sacks. All 5 of those sacks came in the second half, 9 quarterback hits. Now, some of those sacks were, instances where Marcus Mariota should have probably thrown the ball away. But once Carolina got their lead, they were able to pin their ears back and, dial up pressure pretty easily and effectively throughout the second half of this game. And we've seen those same issues crop up time and time again for this Falcon team, particularly up front with the pass protection. That's why Arthur Smith, runs this offense the way that he runs it, with a historically high usage of play action passing, 7-8 man protections all the time, these 2-man route concepts, all these stuff, right? There was a sack I think they gave up in the fourth quarter where they did have a 7-man protection, and I think it was Brian Burns, if I'm not mistaken, had no problem beating that to get to the sack. So this loss is not solely on Marcus Mariota. Certainly he will get criticized for his play. We'll get into that. Trust me, we'll get to that later on today's episode. But this was a complete team loss, right? Carolina essentially out-Falconed the Falcons. They dominated the game on the ground, 128 rushing yards to the Falcons 33 in the first half, right? They ran it 24 times and only threw it 8 times on their first 4 possessions in that first half, right? They had over 60% success rate on their runs. That included a 41-yard touchdown run. I should use air quotes when I say run by Laviska Shenault because it was a backwards swing pass. And he basically ran down the sideline. A couple of Falcons defenders ran into each other. The Falcons blitzed, so they were underhanded. It was a great play call because they basically threw behind the Falcons blitz. And Chanel just basically sprinted towards the end zone. And you had 2 Falcon defenders running into each other on that play. I forgot who it was, probably Richie Grant and somebody else. Rashawn Evans usually is somewhere involved in such tomfoolery. And that basically summarizes, the Falcons' tomfoolery, their poor performance in this game. And we kind of talked about this in the crossover. Like, this was the type of game, given the weather, that the Falcons wanted, that they can impose their will on the ground, limit their passing game. But Carolina wound up doing all of that to the Falcons instead of the Falcons doing that to Carolina. And that's the main reason why they lost. The defense didn't play well in this game, but there were opportunities for this offense to get the team back into the game, and they just could not sustain anything because they couldn't run the ball very effectively in the first half. And certainly their passing game did not compensate for that. You even saw special teams struggle in this game, with Younghoe Koo missing 2 extra points in this game. Again, that's probably due to the weather and the rainy conditions. The bad snaps from Drew Dahlman came back with a vengeance after several weeks where it was a non-issue. Again, probably due to the wet conditions, and that was probably a factor in why Mariota did not play particularly well. But when you look at this game, as I said earlier, the Falcons just got out-falconed, right? And Dean Pease is going to draw his fair share of criticism. I just saw a lot of people calling for him to be fired over the last 48 hours. I don't quite get that. The expectations, I think it's a lot of it is due to me having much lower expectations on what this defense is capable of than a lot of other Falcon fans. Like the last 2 weeks, I think it's fair to be critical of missed tackles and giving up big plays and all that stuff. It's fair. But like, with a bunch of backup cornerbacks and a bottom 5 pass rush, like, are you expecting more out of this defense than what we're currently getting? I'm not. I can't speak for everybody else. Clearly, everybody else is expecting more out of this group, but I'm not. So I don't have the energy to come up here and eviscerate the defense and say, oh, we need to do this. And no, you just need to weather the storm. And you need your offense to play better, but they're not going to be able to do that given, their situation. And this game was not a great situation for them because they couldn't run the football. They were behind schedule, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 18, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 15, 3rd and 18, right? They had a couple of 3rd and shorts, and a lot of them they were able to convert. But like, when you're getting into those situations, behind the chains like the Falcons were, it is a death knell to this limited team. And we'll talk about why they're limited, and a lot of that has to do with the quarterback, right? Their offense isn't built to play from behind and behind the schedule and all these various things. And we'll talk about why that is, because, the quarterback is at the center of that. And we'll get into all of that as we continue today's episode, guys. But before we get there, I do want to plug the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast feed, which is home to 3 shows from 4 different hosts: A to Z with Mark Zeno, Hitting Hard with John Chuckery, and ATL Day Ones with Tanitra Batiste and Jarvis Davis, all on the same feed, covering the local sports as well as national sports. And of course, Locked On Sports Atlanta is also the home for the Locked On Falcons postcast. If you missed Jarvis and myself cracking up on, Jarvis almost got fired, right? Thursday night. So go check that out on Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube. He had some choice words and I had to rein him in. So go check out for those immediate. Now I'm cool and calm, right? But then I was a little loopy coming at you live immediately after game. So if you aren't subscribed to Locked On Sports Atlanta for that postcast, so that you can, see that moment when Jarvis does eventually get himself fired, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta just for that reason alone. Just like, hey, maybe this is the week that Jarvis gets fired. And you, of course, can subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta on YouTube so that you make sure that you can check out that historic event. And now a word from our sponsor, LinkedIn Jobs. They're making it easier for you to find all the people that you want to talk to faster and for free. You can create a free job post in minutes by going to LinkedIn Jobs, and you can reach the world's largest professional network of over 800 million people, guys. LinkedIn Jobs is going to help you spread the word that you're hiring. It's going to give you simple tools like screening questions so you can find the right candidates with the right skills and right experience. And you can quickly prioritize not only who you want to interview, but who you want to hire. It's why all small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus their leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs is going to help you find a candidate that you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every single week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? You can post your job for free. To find one of those 40 million people at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, guys, and thank you once again for making Locked On Falcons your first listen each and every day. And of course, for your second listen, why not check out Locked On Sports today? From the games that matter to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide by subscribing to Locked On Sports today, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So, my good buddy Billy Shakespeare had the question, to bench or not to bench? That is the question. And that is the question surrounding the Falcons. Is it time to hang it up on Marcus Mariota? I think the answer is yes, right? And it goes back to what I said roughly a month ago after the Cincinnati game, which was, I'll give it 3 or 4 more games roughly, to see if this offense can evolve beyond what they were then when they fell behind then and couldn't climb out of that hole. And again, I wasn't expecting it to be fixed overnight, but I did expect to see progress. And what we've seen the last couple of weeks to me is not any real progress in terms of this offense. And again, going back to, I talked about this on the postcast with Jarvis Davis, that I would have been forgiving had it just been, hey, the normal sort of Mariota off game, given the weather, given the play of the blocking, given the lack of the running game, all that stuff. I could understand Mariota not being on his game given those circumstances, right? And by the way, this was a very rough night for Kobe Gossett stepping in at the left guard position. He had a very ugly sequence on the second series of the game where he had like back-to-back holding calls against Matt Ioannidis. All those guys, Ioannidis, who actually I think got hurt in this game, Derek Brown, Marquise Haynes, Brian Burns, they all, are going to have a highlight reel. Everybody has a Falcons highlight, right? So they'll get a couple from this game in this. And, again, had it been a normal lackluster Mariota game, I could have looked past all of that and just seen, hey, there was a rough circumstance. They didn't have it tonight. And, we'll see if they can bounce back next week. But this, to me, was not a normal sort of lackluster Mariota game. This, and the main reason is because he was making some very, very questionable decisions, right? And that's the kindest way I can put it, right? Like there were multiple times where he was able to escape outside the pocket, which again is Mariota doing the thing that he does well, using his legs to extend plays and whatnot, but then making some very bad decisions, throwing the ball downfield, throwing up lobs across his body into double coverage. He did that multiple times, right? I'll be curious to see how many turnover-worthy passes PFF credits him in this game. I feel like there's at least 4 or 5 in this game that should have been interceptions. Only one wound up being an interception, but the most egregious one of all was one in the fourth quarter where he was, got tripped up or whatever, and then tried to throw the ball while going to the ground and wound up throwing it from his back or whatever. Fortunately, his back was on the ground, so he was down, but it wound up being picked off and I think taken back to the house on like a pick six or something like that, 50 yards or something, but it didn't count. But like that to me was just like, that's it. Any hope, any optimism I had that, we were going to see better performances from Marcus Mariota as the rest of the season unfolds kind of ended at that moment with roughly, 7 minutes left in the game at that point in time. And so, we've been talking all year long about Mariota playing clean football, and this game was anything but that, right? This was simply an implosion beneath the lights where Marcus Mariota got it in his head that he was going to go to Charlotte and suddenly become Patrick Mahomes, right? We see Patrick Mahomes do stuff like this and make it work, but that's Patrick Mahomes. You are Marcus Mariota. You are not Patrick Mahomes. And so, that's the we didn't bring you into this so that you could be baby Mahomes or whatever, right? You're supposed to be the grown-up in a room, Marcus, right? You're supposed to make the smart veteran decisions. That's the whole point of why you're in the lineup, not making these egregious, terrible rookie mistakes. Throwing it across your body. Like, what are you doing, my guy? So the question is going to be, now that I've voiced that Mariota should be on the bench moving forward, is he going to be on the bench? And the answer probably is no, right? Arthur Smith said in his post-game presser that he never considered putting Ridder in the game. And he's got a couple of days on this mini bye, to consider it again. And the answer is probably going to be no, right? I'm hoping I'm wrong on that. But, for me, the leash is gone, right? Marcus is choking himself now with that leash. And it's a wrap on him from my perspective. We'll see what Arthur Smith thinks on it, after a couple of days of sitting on it and seeing if we get to Monday or whatever and getting back to a regular practice schedule. And if, Desmond Ritter's getting the starts. We'll find out. But I'm at a point where like it's I don't know. What else do you want me to say? Like I'm done with it. I was willing to give it a chance. We'll wrap up today's episode talking a little bit more about what's left for this team to play for this season. Why it should be Desmond Ridder moving forward. But yeah, I don't know what else to say, guys. I don't have anything profound or interesting. It's just like, we've been talking about this. We've been dancing around this for weeks now, if not months, and being like, okay, at what point is it going to be time to pull them? I think we're at that point. And so now we're just waiting, checking the watch, waiting to see when Arthur Smith is going to get on the same page with the rest of us. So we'll see. Obviously we'll keep you covered here on Locked On Falcons. It's not going to be something I'm going to bring. Arthur Smith needs to be, whatever. We're not going to do that. If he wants to roll with Mariota, he's going to keep rolling with Mariota. But we'll talk about what's the point of that as we wrap up today's episode. But before we get there, guys, I want to let you know that Locked On Sports Atlanta is now on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. So download the Locked On Sports Atlanta app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You get that same great local coverage 24/7 and for free. Again, download the Locked On Sports Atlanta app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And now a word from our sponsor, Simply Safe, guys. Simply Safe is a company I'm very familiar with. Back in 2014, I had a break-in and I didn't have a security system at the time and I needed one. And I went out and got a very affordable one, the most affordable one, which was Simply Safe at the time. But the reason why I've stuck with Simply Safe for the last 8 years is because I trust in their service. I love how customizable they are. They can be customizable for you. If you're looking for a bare bones security system like I was back in 2014, you can get that with Simply Safe and for a very affordable price. But if you're looking to get it decked out with all the bells and whistles, the HD wireless cameras, the leak and smoke detectors, all that and more, glass break detectors, you can get all of that too, again, for a very affordable price. Because at Simply Safe, the only thing that matters is your safety, and with their cutting edge technology of professional 24/7 monitoring agents, they always have your back. They're going to be dispatching police, first responders at the first sign of a threat or an emergency, even if you're not home or can't be reached. So customize the perfect system for you in just a few minutes by going to simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl, and you can save 20% on your Simply Safe security system when you sign up with an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month for free. Just visit simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl to learn more. There's no safe like Simply Safe. So, let's wrap up today's episode. I'm not angry at the Falcons losing. I don't get mad at the Falcons losing, as I say even keeled, guys. I say it all the time, right? I don't get too high after the wins. I don't get too low after the losses, but I am a little embarrassed, right? Right. Not embarrassed because the Falcons lost to the Panthers, right? I kind of expected this, right? It's why on crossover, I was reluctant to pick the Falcons to win, because going into this set of games, I kind of expected the Falcons to split with Carolina because I didn't think they were that much better than Carolina to be able to sweep them. I'm disappointed that the Falcons, did not play well. I'm disappointed that Mariota played bad. I'm disappointed the offensive line continued to stink. I'm disappointed the defense struggled. But again, none of that is new. We've seen all of that multiple times this season, in the first 10 games of the year. Right. Again, it's not shocking that Carolina out-Falconed us, right? I remember when I was doing my whirlwind podcast tour ahead of the Week 8 game, people were asking me, I thought about this match. I'm like, these are two teams that play a very similar style of football, two evenly matched teams that theoretically Carolina should be better because they have a better defense than the Falcons, because they actually have, dudes on that defense, and the Falcons really don't, right? Especially with AJ Terrell out of the lineup, it's basically the Grady Jarrett show, and that's about it. So we saw all of that on display on Thursday night, but it is embarrassing because millions of people, this is going to be the only Falcon games that they saw, and a whole lot of people that cover this sport, my peers, this is probably going to be the only game that they judge the Falcons based off of. And all they're going to ask is why questions. Why are the Falcons continuing to roll with Marcus Mariota? I don't get it. I don't get why are the Falcons having so much problems getting the ball to Kyle Pitts. And unfortunately for people like myself, when I make all these appearances on other podcasts and do these segments or whatever, there's no compelling answers that I can give them, right? Now, my hope is that the Kyle Pitts issue will suddenly go away because we'll have a different quarterback in there very shortly, in Desmond Ridder, because we continue to see Marcus Mariota and Kyle Pitts not be on the same page at all in these games. In the last couple of weeks have only made that even more apparent. But why are the Falcons continuing to roll with Marcus Mariota? There's no compelling answer to that. It's because Arthur Smith thinks that Mariota gives him the best chance to win. Now, I know a lot of people are of the opinion, well, it must be something wrong with Desmond Ridder, because if Arthur Smith is not willing to go to Desmond Ridder at this point in time, given how poorly Marcus Mariota has played, it must be something wrong with Desmond Ridder. I don't really subscribe to that thinking. That's the same sort of thinking that caused so many people to write off Richie Grant last year when he couldn't beat out Eric Harris for a starting job. We know that this coaching staff, and they've done a better job at this year than they have the previous year, but we know this coaching staff believes in veterans, right? That they're going to give veterans that shot. And so Arthur Smith is under the impression, from the best I can tell, that Marcus Mariota gives him a better shot at winning than Desmond Ridder. There's not a whole lot of evidence suggesting that based off on the field, but who am I to sit here and tell Arthur Smith that he's wrong, right? I was one of those people trying to bury them back in May, or as Arthur Smith would say. So, I'm willing. I don't really have a choice, right? But I'm willing to go with the long-term view that, hey, we're going to ride with Marcus Mariota to the end of this season, and we'll give Ridder this redshirt year, and that's going to make him into a better quarterback in year 2 when he beats Marcus Mariota for the starting job next summer, or whatever the case may be. And that's the hope I'm holding on to, that it's all of this is going to prove to be worth it, because Desmond Ridder is going to come out and ball out next year. And all of these issues, when the Falcons fall into a 10-point deficit, when the Falcons have to throw the ball 30 times, which Mariota did throw the ball 30 times in this game, almost matching his season high of 33 in week 1 against the Saints. All of these issues that we're talking about that have been plaguing the Falcons, I hope these get solved, right? I hope the offensive line gets fixed, right, in the offseason. I hope, we actually have a pass rush, and so that we can actually expect the defense to do more than what they have done against Carolina, against the Chargers, and so many teams this year, because they don't have a bottom 5 pass rush like they've had the past 2 years, right? I'm hoping a lot of these problems go away. That's the why that I can, give. But as we stand here today, that's the future, right? Like, those are problems that are not going to get solved between now and the end of the season, right? The offensive line, the defense, all that stuff. And we can hope for progress. We can hope for improvement, but that's the same thing we're hoping for at the quarterback situation. But it does feel like, again, you're not going to solve the quarterback problem. It's not like you put Ridder in and all of a sudden it's going to completely open up this. You're going to play the same style of football, but at least you're not going to get you hope that you're not going to get a guy going out there and just throwing up ducks and prayers and throwing it 14 feet over Kyle Pitts' head on wide open throws over the middle if Desmond Ridder's starting for the rest of the season. So I sit here exasperated, disappointed, embarrassed, whatever words you want to use, hoping that, Arthur Smith, if he continues to stick with his guns and sticks with Marcus Mariota, it works out for the Falcons and they make the playoffs, and it's all worth it, right? It's like they sneak in 8-9 or whatever they got to get to 9-8, whatever they got to get to in order to make the playoffs. And we can sit here and Arthur Smith can say, you guys buried us in May, you buried us in November, when you told me I should have benched the guy, and Marcus Mariota is going to go out here and beat, I don't know, Cooper Rush in January or something. I don't know. They could probably beat Dallas, because Dallas is not a well-coached football team. So who knows at this point in time. But, if they miss the playoffs, Arthur, what are you doing, my guy? What was the point of that? Like, I get it. I get why you're doing it, but like, what was the point? I mean, I know the point you thought was, hey, we're trying to win games, and we think Marcus Mariota gives us the best chance. I get it, but man, you're going to be looking pretty stupid, by year's end if this team misses the playoffs. That's all I know. So I don't know much, but I know that. So we'll see how the Falcons look to figure it out. We'll see what they do with this mini bye, with a lot of time on their heads before facing the Chicago Bears. I remember going on somebody's podcast this summer, talking constantly about all the podcasts I've been on on this episode for some reason. It all comes up. But I remember someone asked me, what game are you looking most forward to? And I said the Week 11 game against the Bears, because at that time I was like, the Falcons might win only like 3 or 4 games. And that's one of them. That's one of the most winnable games, because I figured the Bears would be really bad this year and be the front runner to be the number 1 overall pick this year. But Justin Fields has played pretty well the last couple of weeks. And, that's a team that's probably not going to make a wild card, but at least could make things interesting over the next month or two. And the reason I said that, because I'm all for the chaos, right? I'm all for the Falcon fans sitting here second guessing the decision to pass on Justin Fields, or sitting here crowing about how Justin Fields stunk it up. And this is why we passed on him for Kyle Pitts, or whatever the case may be. But oh boy, imagine Justin Fields coming into Atlanta and leading the Bears to a victory, running it all over this defense. And, Kyle Pitts having 2 catches for 19 yards or whatever his stat line winds up being. Ooh, that's going to be a fun postcast, right? That's going to be a fun rapid reaction. So I'm all about that chaos, right? I'm all about that content, guys. So we'll see what the Falcons do next week, but I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm looking forward to maximum chaos. Bring me all the chaos, right? Whether the Falcons win, whether the Falcons lose, I'm all for that smoke, right? What's the Darren Rovell line? I feel terrible for our country, but this is tremendous content, right? So that's kind of how that's where I'm at, guys. All right, guys, that's where we'll leave it. Really appreciate you tuning in as I try to wrap my head around this loss. And you guys can of course provide your feedback. We'll probably wind up breaking down the film on Monday, and then hopefully have a guest on Tuesday, and then we'll do something else Wednesday, and then we'll have a crossover on Thursday. So that will be the schedule, at least something. So, there will be some opportunities for you guys to get your questions answered, because we may have multiple Q&As next week. And we'll see what happens, but that is your cue. If you want to provide your feedback, tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why I'm right. Tell me why I didn't go hard enough. Tell me why Dean Pease deserves to be fired. Whatever your take is, I'm all ears. At Locked On Falcons on YouTube. Leave a comment there. You can also hit me up on Twitter or Facebook at Locked On Falcons. You can send an email to lockedonfalcons@mail.com, mail.com. Or you can hit me up in the Locked On Falcons Discord. There's a link in the description below. So, guys, really appreciate it. Make sure you give us a like as well. Thank you for making Locked On Falcons your first listen. Check out Locked On Sports Atlanta as your second listen. Check out Locked On Hawks, Locked On Bulldogs, Locked On Braves. If you want to, follow local teams that are actually doing good work. You got Stet Quavius doing his thing. Check out Locked On Bulldogs for that. Trey Young and DeJounte doing their thing. Check out Locked On Hawks for that. And what's going on with Dansby Swanson, check out Locked On Braves for all that. And of course, check out Locked On Sports Today to get, all of the stuff going on around all the sports. Locked On NFL, if you want to, get other opinions on this Thursday night action. And Peacock and Williamson, I'm sure, as also have some thoughts on this game. So check them all out, guys. That's going to do it for us until Monday. Really appreciate you tuning in, guys. I hope you have a great Falcons-less football weekend. Enjoy some football on Sunday without having to worry about the Falcons causing you pain. That's the only upside to these Thursday night embarrassments, like last year against the Patriots, this year against the Panthers. That's the only upside. So you get a stress-free Sunday just watching that sport that we all love, football. So look forward to that. That's all I can leave you with. Appreciate it. Till then.